Welcome to a new series on the channel. The world's worst, the most infamous serial killers by country. So if you enjoy this content and would like to see more, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on the video. Today we are going over Henry McCabe, aka the Malahide murderer. Considered a mass murderer, with 6 people being credited towards him in a house fire. La Manca was a large, picturesque house situated within a seaside resort in the northeast of Dublin. Its occupants were the McDonald family, brothers Peter and Joseph, and their sisters, Annie and Alice. All were unmarried, and they had retired to live at the house in 1918 after running a successful business. On the 31st of March 1926, Henry McCabe, their gardener, alerted the police that the house was on fire. A neighbor helping to look for the occupants of the house spotted a can of paraffin in one of the rooms, which was not ablaze. Further evidence that the fire was not accidental was noticed when the first body was found in the house. It was clear that the victim had been beaten to death, not burned. A few hours later, there were 6 bodies lying dead on the front lawn, all removed from the house, which by now had been destroyed by the blaze. They included all 4 members of the McDonald family and 2 servants, James Clark and Mary McGowan. The only member of the household to survive was Henry McCabe, who, it was noticed, was wearing a pair of trousers that had belonged to one of the dead brothers. It was clear that the fire had been started to cover up the slaughter that had taken place inside the house, for all the victims had been beaten to death with a blunt instrument. Not only that, but they had also been poisoned with a dose of arsenic sufficient to weaken them and render themselves defenseless against a personal attack. McCabe was the prime suspect from the first moment, and as evidence was built up against him, he was charged with the murders. In November he stood trial before Mr. Justice O'Brien. The case against him was strong, but there was a definite lack of motive. The best offered was that he was afraid that the impending sale of the house would cost him his job. McCabe made a post-show in court, and numerous witnesses testified against him, including a guard who had looked after him while on remand. He claimed that McCabe had asked him to pass a message to his wife asking her to lie about the trousers he was wearing by saying that he had been given them a few weeks earlier. The truth was that McCabe had changed into a pair of Peter McDonald's trousers after spoiling his own during the arson. The jury took less than an hour to convict him, and he was later hanged by Thomas B. Airpoint and Robinson. Malahide's most gruesome murder, the La Manca story, began on March 31, 1926, when locals spotted smoke coming from the big house on the Swords Road. Inside lay the bodies of 6 people, apparently killed in a frenzied attack. Dead were brothers Joseph McDonald, 55, and his brother Peter, 51, and their sisters Annie, 56, and Alice, 47, as well as 2 workers, Mary McGowan, 50, from Lusk, and James Clark, 41. At 8:30 a.m. that morning, the first person to spot the flames was the gardener Henry McCabe of Parnell Cottages in Malahide. Ultimately, Henry McCabe, described as a relatively mild-mannered man, would stand trial in Green Street for murder. It opened in early November 1926 before Justice O'Brien, with McCabe pleading not guilty in relation to the charges. The prosecution claimed that between 5 p.m. on the Monday and the discovery on Wednesday morning, McCabe, one by one, dispatched the household and spent his time laying plans for the total destruction of the house and the bodies. The strange thing in the case is that the bodies of the 3 men were naked. Each of the 3 women received a blow to the head that cracked the skull. Chief Supt Leahy gave evidence of bringing McCabe into the station 2 days after the fire and interrogating him for 3.5 hours. A statement was signed afterwards. After some legal argument, the judge said he was not satisfied that the statement was free and voluntary and disallowed it. Very Reverend Dr. Keelty, Ballygher, their home village, spoke of the McDonalds as kind and religious people, while Sheila Riley, a former housekeeper at La Manca, confirmed that a considerable quantity of jewelry was in the house, mainly locked in the linen presses. Items of clothing were removed from McCabe's home and found to have bloodstains. The defense opened with McCabe, who stated that he was a married man with 9 children. the youngest just 10 months old. Summing up, Mr. Island said McCabe was in the dock through the extraordinary accident that he was working in the house in which all the people had met their end. If somebody from the household had lived, they would, according to the methods of the police, have been charged with the murder. Mr. Garrigan, replying, said that there was no plea of insanity from McCabe and he was not illiterate. He was an arch criminal. He was a subtle, skilled man and began a campaign of murder that started on the Saturday and finished on the Wednesday. He claimed La Manca was rifled from top to bottom before being torched. Everything valuable disappeared. Just after 6 p.m. on the 6th day of the trial, it concluded with Justice O'Byrne stating that they were coming to the end of the longest trial in living memory in that court. If you are satisfied that McCabe was the only person who could have committed this crime, you must find him guilty, he told the jury. If you have any reasonable doubt, you must give him the benefit of it. The jury retired, but at 9:50 p.m. returned, after 15 minutes deliberation, to announce that McCabe was guilty of the charge before him. When asked if he had anything to say, he replied, "All I have to say is God forgive them. I am the victim of bribery and perjury." On Thursday morning, December 9th at 8 a.m., the hangman Pierpoint, assisted by Robinson, executed Henry McCabe in Mountjoy Jail, watched by the governor as a crowd of 300 waited outside. Mrs. McCabe, aided by 2 friends, waited at the gates, had bowed and rosary beads in her hand, bent with anguish. Just after 8 a.m., notice of the execution was placed on the gate. Mrs. McCabe collapsing and helped up by friends as they made their way to a motor car. Later, at the inquest, Arthur A. Faulkner identified the remains of Henry McCabe, 48, from Malahide. If you found this interesting and would like to see this continued, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel.